Okay, this video is 9 out of 10 ain't bad, part 4, I think it is, part 4. And it's part of a message that I put together and preach in other places. I have preached it in several places. And the idea is I'm taking 2 statements by Jesus that if you would take these statements and put them side by side, out of the context, they would contradict each other. And a person who is a bibliophobe will say, see, the Bible contradicts. Even Jesus contradicts. Well, sure, if you take a statement out of its context, you can make the Bible seem to contradict. In Luke 9, verse 50, Jesus said, forbid him not, for he that is not against us is for us. That's an answer to a statement that John made. In Luke 11:23, Jesus said, he that is not with me is against me. So one is saying, you don't have to agree with me 100%. You don't have to be in my camp, okay, to get my approval. And the other is stating, you have to agree with me 100%. So which one is right? Well, the Luke 9 is the reaction you have towards people, a man, a person, an individual. Okay, in Luke 11 is a reaction you have toward spirits. Okay, in Luke 9 out of 10 ain't bad. Okay, like in basketball, it's real good. In bowling, 9 out of 10 isn't good. And that would be spirits in Luke 11. Both of these statements are recorded twice in the Gospels. Okay, and in the Luke 9, basically the context is pretty short. In the Luke 11, I'll come across the context when I get to that part. This is part 4 about, is there a time that you so-called break fellowship with a believer, or you need to leave a church? Okay, sadly, in this age of apostasy, yes, there's times of doing that. You would hope and pray that a mature individual, a mature believer, realizes, hey, I'm not going to agree with the pastor 100%. If we hit 9 out of 10, that's going to be pretty good. Okay, and so that's the idea on this video, is where do you draw the line? Now, personally, I've heard of preachers say, I had to make a stand. I had to make a big, bold stand for the truth. I had to defend the truth. Okay. I had to break fellowship with so-and-so. In 32 years of pastoring in Rensselaer and 22 years of pastoring in Lowell, I've only had to kick a man out of church once in 30-some years. And it's because he went across the line, is what he did. I have learned through the years that you don't really have to break fellowship with any Christian. But if you have a certain belief system and they know you believe it, they will purposely avoid you. And many of them will talk about you, about, so-and-so, and blah, 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 blah. So they run their mouths. And Paul said that's part of the ministry, okay, where he said in 2 Corinthians chapter 6 about the ministry, in verse 3, he says, giving no offense in anything, that the ministry be not blamed. But here's what people said about Paul. He said, by honor and dishonor, by evil report and good report, as deceivers and yet true, as unknown and yet well known. A farmer lived across the road from us. He told me as a kid, and I don't know why I remember this, but he told me, hey, Dave, it doesn't matter what people say about you, just as long as they're talking. And I'm like, as a kid, like, okay, but somehow that was a good lesson. That gentleman I was able to lead to the Lord late in his life, preached his funeral. But that's quite a thought, how the Lord gave that statement to him, and somehow, as a dumb little kid, you remember that statement. But, through the years, I haven't had to, quote, break fellowship with anybody. I've learned that if you take professing Christianity as a whole, if you believe in the new birth, being born again by belief in Jesus Christ, and that you have eternal security, 80%, if not more, professing Christians will walk away from you, will leave you. Why? Because the vast majority of them don't believe in eternal security. Now, I believe in eternal security for the born-again believer, but not in the Old Testament, but for the New Testament, for the born-again believer. But I've learned that you don't have to break fellowship, but they will leave you. Now, of your remaining, let's say 20%, if you believe in the perfection, the purity of the preservation of the words of God, especially in the King James Bible, of that 20% remaining, about 19 of the 20% is gone. They will leave you. Oh, so-and-so's King James. Okay, now you got that 1% area. Okay, that 1%. Now, that 1% of King James onlyist, if you believe in dispensations, especially righteousness dispensed in a different way in different ages, of that 1%, about 9 out of 10 of those are going to dump you. They're going to say, oh, so-and-so's heretic. He's a heretic. He's lost. He's stupid. He's a Ruckmanite. Whatever. All these certain names. You're getting down to a pretty small crowd. A crowd, pretty few. Like Jesus said in Revelation 3, verse 20, behold, I stand at the door and knock. He's standing outside the church door knocking to see if he can fellowship with somebody inside the church. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. And then Jesus said, if any man hear my voice. Not real optimistic there. If there's a man that hears my voice in the church and open the door, I will come into him and will sup with him and he with me. In these final days of the church age, as apostasy is wreaking havoc in the church, revival might occur only on the individual basis. One party here, one party there. And thank God for the internet, where this one party who doesn't have a Bible-believing church to go to is able to get fed online. And really, that's one of my sole intent of doing these videos. For you folks that don't have a Bible-believing church that you can go to. We have a gentleman in our area. He was a college professor. He taught business in a college, and he lived 3 hours away from our church, and he would drive twice a week. And when he started doing that years ago, I asked him, I said, why are you driving so far? He said, I want to hear this Bible-believing preaching. Now, there's many a fundamentalist between us, but in this area, a Bible believer, it was that important to him, and I have to admire him for it. One of the most gracious men that I know. So I've learned through the years, most of the time, you won't even have to break fellowship with anybody, a believer. You don't want to. You're trying to be gentle and appeal to folks, but the belief system is what they don't want to accept. So, is there a time, where if the party doesn't leave the area of disagreement alone, they just got, you Baptist briders are like that. You just can't leave it alone. The Baptist bride. You're so cheap with your Lord's Supper, you won't let anybody take part of your Lord's Supper unless you got baptized in a Baptist church. What a thing. If a person just can't leave it alone where they always say, I don't agree with you here. It's like going to somebody's house and having a million, you gripe about something you didn't like. Don't have them at your house again. So what is the Bible admonition for something like this? In 1 Timothy chapter 6, and you'll find it's kind of interesting. You find these at the smaller, shorter epistles, because that's when things tend to get worse. Where Paul said in 1 Timothy 6:5, and he gives a list. He is proud, knowing nothing, doting about questions and strifes of words. Okay, so there you go. So somebody's always wanting to argue about something. He said and then these people suppose that gain is godliness. From such withdraw thyself. You just walk away. You don't have to rebuke them per se. Just walk away. Avoid the friendship. Avoid the situation. Maybe it's in some situation, it's the Lord that has to deal with them. In 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, he put it this way in verse 5. And if any man obey not our word by this epistle, note that man. Just make a mental note of it and have no company with him, that he may be ashamed. Yet count him not as an enemy, but admonish him as a brother. So you just make a mental note of that. Okay. I see him in the store. Maybe he didn't see me. Maybe I'll go down the wrong aisle. Or if he does, I'll just say, hey, how you doing? Be polite and kind to him. In Romans chapter 16, verse 17, he said this, Now I beseech you, brethren, mark them which cause divisions and offenses contrary to the doctrine which ye have learned, and avoid them. You see, just avoid them. He didn't even say rebuke them. Why? If the guy's a scorner will not listen to the wise. Don't waste your breath on it. Now, is there a time where you so-called break fellowship? Okay, and the time occurs when Paul gives it in 1 Corinthians 5, 1 Corinthians 5, where this party in 1 Corinthians 5, it says, and ye are puffed up and have not rather mourned. In this context, it is the promotion and glorification of fornication. Okay, when a pastor or where they are basking in their fornication, or they don't deal with it, or they just move them from parish to parish, okay, where it says here, your glorying is not good. When the party is boasting or glorying, we have grace. So-and-so did this, but we have grace. Okay, that's when you part company. This is why churches throughout the world, Bible-believing churches, there's times where you need to make a public statement against the sodomy, androgynous, transgender agenda because they want you to accept them and promote them. That's when you got to say something. When they are seeking your glorification. Now, why are you seeking my glorification or promotion? You must be feeling guilty about it if you're wanting somebody else to promote you. I mean, if what you're doing is right, then just relax in what you're doing. Keep it to yourself. But when you seek the promotion of somebody else, in your spirit, you know you're wrong. But you want to get somebody else's approval. Okay, in 1 Thessalonians 1 verse 18, Paul reveals, 1 Timothy 1 verse 18, Paul reveals the other time when you do need to say something. Okay, where in 1 Timothy 1:18, this charge I commit unto thee, son Timothy, according to the prophecies which went before on thee, that thou by them mightest war a good warfare, holding faith and a good conscience, which some, having put away concerning faith, have been made shipwreck, of whom is Hymenaeus and Alexander, whom I have delivered unto Satan. Okay, now I didn't mention it in 1 Corinthians 5. Paul did deliver that party unto Satan. And this is the other time. And this time is a promotion or glorification of a false doctrine. Okay, where the person who's promoting this won't leave it alone, and they won't back off until you accept them or give them the opportunity to believe it. And that's when you just say, hey, I'm out of here. I'm out of here. I'm gone. No, I'm not going to promote something I don't agree with. Okay, so those are the two basic areas where you quote a break fellowship. Is a glorification of fornication and a glorification or promotion of false doctrine, where this party can't leave it alone. Okay, they are demanding your approval or acceptance. You see, there are some areas where it's like the bulldog and the skunk. A bulldog knows he could beat the skunk, but it's not worth the stink. There's times you don't need to fuss about things. I've had occasional attendees of either church where one party, I remember, he believed in soul sleeping. He believed in that. And I just simply pointed out what the Bible says to the New Testament believer: when you're absent from the body, you're present with the Lord. Well, I don't agree with that. I said, well, it's your choice. If you want to sleep, go ahead and sleep. If you think to depart from your body is gain, so you're sleeping, Rip Van Winkle, go ahead. I don't care. You know, where it says, Paul said, I'm absent from the body, I'm present with the Lord. Man, you're more conscious after you're dead than you were when you're alive, because you see both worlds now, the invisible and the visible. I don't care if the guy wants to believe that. Now, if he wants to teach it, and if our men want to hear what he's got to say, I'll let him do it. I would. But if he can't leave it alone and wants to promote it, then that's when I'm just going to say, come on, pal. You're not given the authority in this church to pastor or promote your ways. Especially if I gave you the option to do it. Okay, another one. This one just boggles my mind. Bible believers have split company over, is the tribulation 3.5 years or 7 years? And I had a missionary ask this in my house. He was hesitant. I don't know if I should ask you, but where you stand, what's your belief on a 3.5 or 7 year tribulation? I said, I could care less. I could care less. And he goes, oh, I'm so glad you said that. Actually, I don't think either one's right. I think there's probably 2,300 days approximately left. Not a full 7, but more than 3.5. But I'm not worried about it. I'm not going to be in the trib. Now, I know some Christians that actually think they're going into the tribulation. Hey, if they want to, it don't matter to me. When I deal with these people, I don't, tell them, you're dead wrong, you're going to hell, you're lost, you're a heretic. I don't care. Hey, if they want to go into the tribulation, I would encourage them. And I've told some of them, I said, you think you're going to the tribulation, here's my advice. I would suggest you go to Jordan, Edom, Jordan, buy a house, provide some foodstuffs you got there, get some storage, get some food, and get ready to hunker down. And then they usually say, what are you talking about? I said, didn't think you knew. You didn't know about the doctrine, did you? Don't you know about Petra? Don't you know about Edom? Oh, don't worry about it. I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised. You see, there's some things it's just not worth the stink. Okay? I am fully persuaded I'm not going to be around for the tribulation. I mean, I go back to Daniel chapter 9, and I know some guys that think, oh, I'm going into the trib. Well, have a good time. Enjoy yourself. Whoa, I don't want to. I said, you don't have to. Come to the Lord Jesus Christ by grace through faith. Yeah. I mean, I used to visit in the local county jail, And the guys in the prison would argue against eternal security. And I would think to myself, I would think we should be turning the tables here. But what's funny is there's guys that would come on Wednesdays who believe that a born-again believer could actually get unborn again. And then I would come in on Saturdays and show that a born-again believer is eternally secure in Christ. And these guys had the audacity to work on a young man who I'd been discipling and told him for over an hour that he could lose his salvation. So he, in his wisdom, wisely said to them, okay, tell me how many times you've lost your salvation. And they said none. Then he said, well, then you lied to me for an hour. That's right, they did. They lied to him. They promoted a falsehood. Had another guy in the prison, but he would ask me about eternal security and the verses that teach somebody could lose their salvation. He did that for 4 weeks. And we had a discussion for an hour. On the last 4th week, I was sort of kind of getting tired of the dude. But I got one more question. And he says, it's in 1 John, I can't find it. And I said, chapter 3, verse 8 and 9. He said, and he looked it up. He said, yeah, that's it. He said, oh, what's the answer? So I gave him the answer. And then he didn't ask about that ever again. And then he started asking me to bring books in so he could study. About a year later, he was being shipped out to the big house from the county to the state. And I asked him, I said, hey, you remember when we first met and we started discussing, you asked questions about eternal security? And he said, yeah, I did. I said, what were you doing? He said, well, to be honest with you, he said, I would use your arguments against the guys on Wednesday, and I'd use their arguments against you on Saturday. And he said, I couldn't find any holes in your argument, and I found all these holes in their arguments. And I thought to myself, that was wise. Isn't that what sports are, where 2 opposing teams compete each other and play the game? People say, Christians often say, well, I don't think you should argue about religion. You don't? You watch football? Go kid somebody else. No, you should have friendly discussions. Now, I've been in these discussions where I've relaxed, no problem, and the other party's kind of getting sweaty, nervous, and then I'll help them with their arguments. One of these guys, where he was trying to say you could lose your salvation, and I said, man, you didn't even give the best verses, so I gave him some of the other verses, and he said, yeah, right. What a joke. You see, so where do you draw the line? When this party wants to force their beliefs on you or bully you or manipulate you and they can't leave it alone, kindly walk away. That's what I do. Just kindly walk away and let God deal with them.